My name is Traci Brautigan, and I am the mental health therapist here at Tranquility Woods. One of our main goals as part of this process, being a co-occurring facility, is to really focus in on the mental health component. So all of our clients, when they come in, they get a mental health evaluation. And what that does is give us really just a clear picture and a clear history of what somebody is dealing with from a mental health perspective, right? Once we have that clear picture, kind of independent of the substance use, we can kind of rule out or determine, right, if more mental health concerns and needs are needed. And then we kind of base our therapy structure around that. So in addition to dealing with the underlying addiction, we also make sure as part of the treatment plan that if somebody has a bipolar diagnosis or depression or anxiety, that we're treating that as well as the addiction. So everyone that comes in, they get a mental health evaluation and then a treatment plan specifically outlined for their mental health. Within that, we talk a lot about issues with grief, how to deal with depression, symptoms of mania and depression in bipolar. We implement grounding techniques for anxiety, mindfulness. We have the meditation and the yoga. So that mental health piece is such an important part of this process, and that's part of what we do here. So cognitive behavioral therapy is an approach where we try to link the behaviors and the emotions of the client. So we try to get them to really gain some insight into how their emotions and their thinking impacts their behavior. So in CBT therapy, we try to take a look at those thought patterns, right? And how that negative sense of self contributes to the way that a person feels, and then in turn makes them act a certain way. Trauma is a very interesting thing. Trauma is a very subjective experience, right? Like what we know about trauma is that you could have the two people, right, and they could go through the same traumatic experience. Let's say they go through the same car accident, right, and one person could go home and sleep like a baby, and the other person could be really affected or impacted by it. And what we know about trauma is that it gets stored in a part of the brain, and then it starts to affect us throughout our daily lives. So the purpose of treatment, in treating trauma, is to really take that memory, those experiences, those sensations, and kind of work through it so then a person can start really responding to life in a different way. And we do that with a variety of different tactics. We do it with meditation and mindfulness, really going over the event for somebody, and then kind of teaching some skills so that when a person does get triggered by a traumatic incident, they know how to deal with it in a healthier way. So I think relationships are an important component of all of us, right? We have this innate need to connect to another person and then people around us, right? So part of recovery is building a better relationship with ourselves, right? And then in turn with that, building a better relationship with those around us. So recovery is about looking at, when we come in, what is that relationship with myself? What are some of the negative underlying messages that I say to myself that then prevents me from feeling really good about myself? So an intervention would be, when that feeling of I am powerless, or I'm not good enough, or I'm unworthy, when that comes in, applying skills to that so that a person can build a better relationship with themselves. So when I'm dealing with all of that under the surface, that really makes it hard for me to build a relationship with somebody else, right? And also in recovery, relationships get pretty toxic, right? So when families come in or we're dealing with relationship issues, it's a lot about rebuilding trust, creating new patterns of communication, looking at what destroys the connection between two people. So in a therapeutic process, we just kind of take a look at what are those patterns and find ways to bring people ultimately back together, whether that's through communication or rebuilding trust. studies kind of show that people get better when their families are on board, right? And the more support we have makes the outcome of treatment better. So the purpose of family counseling in this kind of a therapeutic component is it gives the person who's in treatment an opportunity when that loved one comes in for a family session to really bring them up to speed on what they've been working on. It gives the loved one who's been suffering the opportunity and a safe place to kind of say, hey, here's some of the fears, right? Here's some of the destruction that has been done in active addiction. And they get a therapist to kind of sit with that with them and help them kind of feel safe to expose some of that. And then the therapist can kind of put in some best practices, some coping skills, so that both people can grow in that kind of a format. Typically in family therapy, we talk about what changes both sides needs to make in order to promote recovery, and whether that's the family, attending Al-Anon or their own support group, or maybe seeing an individual therapist. We talk about ways to rebuild trust, suggesting that the addict become accountable, predictable, responsible, dependable. How do they communicate, right? When their loved one comes out of treatment and, all of a sudden they're 15 minutes late coming home from work, and that family member is thinking, oh, did they return to relapse? So what we do is build in skills so that that anxiety, right, around is relapse going to happen, or what does the future look like? We try to build in those skills so that people feel safer in their next steps when they're moving forward in recovery. Change can happen immediately. Your life can change directions, right? With a simple decision to accept help. I think we can't do this alone. And a lot of times when we're in the grips of addiction, we're almost blinded by the fact that there's like another way out. And that couldn't be further from the truth, right? So I think just that change can happen immediately, and that change can be really scary, but it doesn't outweigh the benefits of what recovery can give us. So I think just have hope, take a risk, and accept that the resources are available, and it never has to be this way again.